We've all grown up watching pretty cringeworthy films, which back at the time we considered the best thing ever. Nowadays, we don't want to speak too much about the fact that we used to know all the High School Musical routines, and that we cried over wanting Joe Jonas or Demi Lovato to marry us. But we still have a laugh at the good times and at just how naive we were. However, if you ever admit that at some point you might have enjoyed watching Twilight, you're immediately doomed to be met with the most intense stages of hate. But let's take a step back. Before becoming a multi-billion-dollar worth franchise, Twilight was actually a series of books, and as a matter of fact, one of the last immensely popular book series right before the internet completely took over our lives. During the early 2000s, the internet was widely used, but it definitely didn't play such an important role in teenagers' lives as it does today. So other activities, for example reading books, especially teen-oriented ones, was quite a popular interest. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is a great example of a big favourite. Even the 14 Hour Stars, although that was already pushing a little into the social media era. In addition to the lack of the 24/7 access to internet, the early 2000s were a time which sat right after the geeking out phase of the 80s and 90s, where everybody was into Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Back to the Future. It was just past the obsession with Paris Hilton and Britney pop culture, but right before the current era of internet obsession, of internet basically being a fundamental part of our life. That in-between phase, roughly from 2005 to 2012, was the time of wanting to be hipsters, intellectuals on a Tumblr level. Everybody wanted to be fun, rebellious teens, but no longer in a Lizzie McGuire manner. Everybody wanted to be the person who knew how to use professional cameras and post ridiculously obnoxious and over-filtered photos online with a Jack Kerouac quote beneath. Everybody still had the old MP3 with Christina Aguilera's music on it, but then they'd ask their older cousin to give them a Linkin Park CD to appear more metal. In the meanwhile, the Twilight books were being released, and being one of the last huge popular book series, there wasn't really anything bigger to put them in the corner. They had all the attention and a client base of wannabe artsy kids, as well as the many other people out there who just wanted something a little different. The Twilight books are set in a world in which vampires exist. They are immortal, strong, incredibly beautiful, intelligent, and rich. While some of them still act like your regular violent vampire, most of them have learned to adapt to our society, to live within our human society. Now, all is good until the main vampire, Edward, falls in love with a human being, Bella. The romantic relationship that develops from that is on a near epic level. It's against all odds, against nature, against all the rules that keep separate the supernatural world from the human one. It's a love story of defeating death, of lust and violence, and pride in defending your loved one. So of course, any teenager, even the one with the highest number of Bukowski quotes, was looking for a love story like that. Because when you're 15, your idea of love is of something eternal, something your parents wouldn't want, wouldn't approve of, something that makes you appear brave. Then over the course of the years, that teenage culture began to detach even more from the early Hilary Duff, Zac Efron phase, and the intellectual Tumblr moment became much darker. The dark, emo, alternative, hot topic, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco phase began. It was a moment in time in which we'd all behave as if the whole world was a My Chemical Romance music video. We would religiously dress in black, with over-the-top and nearly goth makeup, ripped clothes, skulls everywhere, layered dyed hair, and we would behave as if the whole world was against us. We would pretend to be sad, we would talk about death, do sketches of cute but fluffy dead animals. Back at the time, we were looking for love, but with a hint of deadly troubles, lust and blood and sadness. And when the Twilight books became Twilight films, they basically offered it all on a silver plate. If the books hadn't attracted enough fans, it was now over every billboard because of the films. And the films played a double card. On the one hand, they dragged in all those who were looking for an eternal love story. On the other hand, they didn't leave out those who couldn't stand the idea of another Cinderella story film. These films had the perfect, huge audience, and the spread of their popularity was probably helped by how social media used to work. When people used to meet around specific topics of interest, it wasn't more of around somebody's personal profile as it is now. Now, the Twilight films follow the book step by step. So we have Vampire Edward and human being Bella, portrayed by Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart. and basically everybody else in the film is or looks like a supermodel. And that is a very important factor in popularity, especially with younger audiences, because they will become obsessed with good-looking actors. They will want to be like them, they'll try to imitate them, they idolize them. In those years, Pattinson and Stewart, especially when they became a couple in real life, was so popular that they were basically nowadays Kim and Kanye. And on a financial level, it was heaven. This film was perfect. And in addition to the box office revenue, the amount of side products that were sold was immense. You could purchase silhouettes of Edward looking over you in bed, making you feel safe. Candles, water bottles, shower curtains, clothing, jewelry, board games, dolls, sex toys, contact lenses to make your eyes look like the vampires. And I think at one point Volvo even had a competition with a Twilight quiz to win a car, because Edward drives a Volvo. It took a few seconds of Edward walking into school while wearing Ray-Ban Wayfarers for the whole world to want them. The town of Forks in Washington, the town in which the story is set, and which has roughly 3,000 residents, at one point was having an average of 8,000 tourists per month. At one point, fans were even collecting money to save the town's high school for renovations. The Twilight franchise was an economic paradise. It was perfect. I can't think of anything that was more adapt to the mood at the time. Because regardless of the plot, which was already perfect for the atmospheres teenagers wanted at the moment, it also conveyed a vibe which nowadays would basically be the 2008 version of a film in which the male protagonist looks like an Abercrombie model and the female protagonist would be, I don't know, somebody who looks like Lauren Gray, and they would have romantic dates in perfectly white, aesthetically pleasing bedrooms and a film on the wall with one of those little projectors they're always trying to promote. Nothing would sell more than that. Now, when we look back at the Twilight works with minds of adults and of people who live in different times, we can definitely see how flawed those films and books were. The premise wasn't terrible, but the development was atrocious. The dialogues were poorly written with cliche lines, and in addition to that, the relationship was definitely far from healthy. It was more of an obsessive dependence in which neither person had a life of their own beyond the love story. Now that's the ideal scene you're looking for when you're searching for something comforting, the guilty pleasure. Or when you're young and you don't really know how relationships work, how life really works in the future. Either way, in that moment, you're not looking for a realistic vision of a relationship, of marriage and breakups and cheating and children and parents, financial issues. You're not looking for a film like Marriage Story or Other People. And that's not something strictly relative to Twilight, it's something you see happening all the time. Think of To All the Boys I've Loved Before. A recent Netflix film about which people went absolutely crazy and which basically launched Noah Centineo into teen movie stardom. Now, under a cinematic point of view, that film is terrible. The acting is mediocre, the lines are awful. But if you're somebody who in that moment just wants to feel safe and happy and cuddled in a perfect love world for 2 hours, that's great, especially if you're young and that's all you're looking for. So here comes in the hate factor. Because although many didn't like To All the Boys I Loved Before, they definitely didn't spread a fraction of the hate that Twilight received. When After, another teenage film, came out, people made fun of it, they got a little angry, but it was widely accepted as just a cringe-fueled story. But the hate Twilight received was monstrous, and it basically became the norm, to the point that there is no space for discussion. It has just been universally accepted that Twilight is just something you have to hate. Let me give you a practical real-life example. So around a year ago, it was the 10th anniversary of the release of the first Twilight film, and some cinemas decided to show it again as just a one-time special event. Now, I don't mind rewatching the Twilight films, they're again a sort of guilty pleasure, but I definitely don't think they were something so anticipated to be shown again at the cinemas. It wasn't like the anniversary of the release of The Godfather. But still, it wasn't really pushed into everybody's faces, a lot of people didn't even know about this. There wasn't a huge advertisement about it. But one day around that time, I was at the cinema, and during the pre-movie advertisements, they showed a brief trailer for Twilight, reminding people that there would be this special event. And many people in the cinema started laughing at the trailer, booing, making fun of it. Now, this was a late night film. The audience was mostly people who were at least 25 to 30, and the type of film we were about to watch was a completely different genre. Of course you're not the kind of person who want to pay to watch or rewatch Twilight, but would you have booed if the trailer was, I don't know, for a preschooler's film, like Trolls or Turbo about snails racing? Would you have made sure that your friends were watching you making fun of any bad trailer? Probably not, but it's become the norm to make sure people know you hate on the popular thing. Another effect of this hate put on the film was the fact that the actor who portrayed Edward, Robert Pattinson, was basically labelled as the worst actor in the industry. Still today, there are people who refuse to watch films because he is in the cast, or they will watch a film and then loudly point out that because he was in it, it wasn't that good.
Nobody's ever loved anybody as much as I love you.
There's one exception.
Do you have any idea what films Adam Sandler did when he first started?
This would be an earthquake right here. See, that didn't cost us anything right there. Now enjoy the flick. I'll see you later.
But that didn't stop anybody from liking Uncut Gems, did it? Twilight was Robert Pattinson's first big film ever, unless you consider his role as Cedric Diggory in the Harry Potter films. He's now worked on weird, dark science fiction films like High Life. He's acted alongside Willem Dafoe in the award-winning The Lighthouse. He's been picked as the new Batman, in addition to dozens of other titles between Twilight over a decade ago and now. I've tried over the time to figure out why Twilight received so much hate. I've tried to pin it down to the fact that back at the time people used to have very polarized opinions. It was either Justin Bieber or heavy metal. I've tried to think of other most hated films, but none of them have received as much criticism as Twilight. Not even the 2016 version of Ghostbusters or Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. I found a discussion on Reddit in which people were trying to pinpoint the core reason why people tend to hate what is popular. And someone argued that it's because popular films, for example, are popular because they sort of have a very easy, common situation which a wide audience will enjoy. But Twilight isn't exactly your typical love story. I think that the common consensus is that as soon as quite a few people start disliking a product, it will be easier for others to follow suit and criticize it in the same manner, rather than stand up and speak their own opinion, as they will be likely flooded with nasty comments. I don't really know how to put all of this together, but I'm very curious to see how the situation will evolve after the Batman with Robert Pattinson will be released, if he'll ever lose his hate trail, and so on. So let me know what your thoughts on this topic are. Leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Bye.